Welcome to episode 183 of the Disorganized Wizards Club podcast. My name is Alex. I'm joined as always by Adam.
What up?
And Cam.
Hello.
And we're a group of Ottawa-based players that play just about anything and everything we can qualify for. We talk about decks, tournament stories, just about anything to help you and ourselves get better at Magic.
Oh yeah, we have lots of avenues, lots of pathways for you to improve your game.
Absolutely.
And no shortage. The Versus series last night was a ton of fun. I had a great time, even though the internet was a little choppy.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but Adam and I mean, for the Versus, if anyone's wondering, like, we all just share our screens over Discord. Stelly watches and shows it to the stream. And I guess Adam and I were having internet problems because we were sending out like 2, maybe 3 frames per second if we were lucky.
Yeah.
It was a little rough.
Did you guys get a chance to rewatch the VOD of it to see what it looked like?
I saw what it looked like when I was watching your guys' match.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of tuned in during the stream and saw how ugly it was looking, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't good, but hopefully we'll have that sorted out for next week. And if you want to tune in to DWC Versus, it's every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we'll be battling some Standard again in the new format.
Yeah, we'll have some brews that we actually were able to test on a ladder with the new ban list.
Exactly. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah, it's weird. Our internet is like normally really good, but then every once in a while it just goes down for no reason. But it's pretty consistent that it goes just down for no reason. Maybe like every other day it goes down for 15 minutes or it's slow. I don't know why.
I upgraded my internet the other month, and I now have like an insane upload speed, which is amazing for streaming. It's been really great. And it cost me less money than I was paying before somehow.
Yeah, telecommunication prices and deals in Canada don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
Yeah, not at all. Didn't make any. But before we kick things off in the show, we have a big announcement. The next DWC event is coming June 28th, which is Core 21 release weekend on MTG Arena. We have over $500 cash prize pool for this event. It's going to be standard best of 3 on Arena. Signups will be on MTG Melee. They'll be in the show notes below, so you can go register for that if you want. We're going back to a Twitch subscription required for the event this time around, since we're shelling out over $500 in cash. So if you want to come play some Standard on release weekend after Core 21, go sign up now. MTG Melee for the next DWC event coming soon.
Yeah, Twitch subscription, or if you've been a patron with us for over a month, that's also valid and we'll put you in. Much love to our patrons. Thank you for the continued support. You can come win some cash.
Absolutely. And speaking of patrons, we have some new exciting news as well, as we're going to be updating our Patreon tiers. So as always, our $1 tier gives full access to the DWC Discord and to our pre-show, which if you don't know what the pre-show is or haven't heard about it before, we record ourselves writing out our show notes before every episode, just talking amongst ourselves. It's raw, uncut, unedited. Throw that up for all of our patrons.
The most disorganized we are ever at.
Exactly. So if you want access to that and the Discord, just $1 per creation will get you access to that. And what we've added to the $1 tier was if you've been in the tier for 1 month or more, you have access to all of our paid tournaments.
Yeah, so even just any of our patrons, we want to make sure that they get access to everything. We've been running tournaments on Twitch, but we wanted to have the people who supported us for so long, the very people who demanded we make a patron. We didn't even know that was a thing. And, we knew it existed, but we just didn't really think we should bother. But they've been, really supportive, and it's helped us transfer a lot of in different spaces for content and get to go do a lot of extra things because of this. And host these tournaments. So yeah, of course, the patrons get access. Yeah,
absolutely. We also have a $5 tier, which gives you all the benefits from the $1 tier. Plus you get some custom DWC tokens mailed out to you, courtesy of Inkling Customs. So that tier hasn't changed at all. It just has, you'll get access to our paid events as well. The biggest change though, is the access to our $10 tier, which gives you all previous benefits. Plus, we're adding some merch items. We'll have a DWC t-shirt mailed to you after 1 month of being in this tier. You get a custom DWC playmat mailed to you after 2 months of being in that tier. And also, we're adding a 1-hour coaching session per month with a member of the DWC. So if any of that interests you, you want to get some DWC merch and a one-on-one session with one of us, check out that. And before we wrap this up, just wanted to say, like Adam was alluding to, we really appreciate all of the support we've gotten so far. None of this would be possible without all of you. So thank you so much. And we're looking forward to doing a lot more exciting stuff for all of you.
Yeah, no doubt. Also, I mean, those who can't do, I'm not the best player in the world, Pro Tour under my belt, but like I ain't good, Magic's hard. But those who can't do teach, and I'm pretty good at that. So if you want some advice, hit me up.
Yeah.
I'm bad, but I can probably help you get better. Isn't that how it is? I mean, look at me as a weightlifting coach out here setting like collegiate national records, working with like world record holding team, but like I was just useless when I competed.
Yeah. And
it's because I don't have the single focused drive that determines expertise in the modern world. Like I'm way too scattered in my interests and pursuits, and as a result, I will learn a lot about them, but I won't single-mindedly practice them.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I think
Yeah.
that's pretty common, but like expertise in is so much about just constant repetition and focus, which I lack the desire to do. But in so doing, the sort of diverse interests, that have made me a pretty good coach. So that's my plug.
Right on.
I feel like I have an asymptotic ceiling in most things I do, not because of like an inherent skill cap, although I'm sure there is one, but just based on the fact that when I lose, I see things I can improve, and so I'm motivated to play again. But if I win in like any game, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's how that should have gone. And then I like go watch a show or something. So the more I win, the less I play, and that sort of caps me.
Yeah, so like it gets so close to going over that edge, but you just don't.
Yeah, I mean, like if I improve, then I win more, so I play less, so I improve less, and then dare I say,
it's just a self-selecting. Yeah. You were just where you were meant to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just doing the thing, and everything just works out. You just sort of wait around.
Exactly.
All right. Well,
speaking of things working out for the DWC, we had a Take Our Money this past Sunday, which is sort of a fun, small tournament series that we put on because we got jealous of the people that got to play in our events. So we devised this plan for us to play in our own events. They only have a prize for first place. This one offered $100 cash prize. But obviously the trick is that we're in it as well. So you have to come potentially fight against us in the Swiss or in the top 8 and try and take our money from us. And this weekend, no one could.
Exactly. This has been a winner takes all event, and we've done it 3 times now. This time we added bounty prizes. So if you beat one of us during the Swiss or in the top 8, you got an arena code sent to you. So that was a cool thing that we did this time around. But on the show last week, I called out our listeners and competitors and told them that I would dominate them in the tournament and best of luck trying to take my money from me. And I followed up and won the entire event. So get wrecked, nerds.
Despite your own admission of just playing.
Oh my God. I played so bad in the top 8. It was unbelievable.
It happens.
Yeah, Adam and I were both watching. And obviously we don't want to we're not going to be unsportsmanlike and help Stelly. He's going to play on his own. But as soon as he committed to a decision that we thought was bad, we'd be like, yeah, I don't know about that, man.
He was just instantly I don't know why I did that so many times.
Every single time too, I realized 2 seconds after I did it, I was like, wow, that was terrible. I don't know what that decision was, but
funny.
Didn't matter. We played we played Jeskai Luka for one last hurrah. Snuck into 8th place for the top 8 after starting 4-0 and losing the last 2. We got in by 1% on breakers.
That's exactly what happened to me. It happened to both of us because I got in at 7th, also going 4-0-2-0-2.
Yeah. But it was super funny, and it was a really fun event. Got to play against friend of the show and Canadian icon P. Sams himself in the finals to take him down, cementing his spot as first loser in all of our events.
Yeah, 1 spot out of prize in the last 2 events he's played in.
Yeah, exactly. But Cam put together a really great highlight video from the stream up on our YouTube channel. So if you want to check out some highlights from the event, head on over to YouTube, search the Disorganized Wizards Club. And, maybe you should throw us a little sub while you're there. Check out the videos. Really cool. Great job to Cam for putting that together.
Yeah, I busted out a video editor for the first time. So it was a video editor up on one monitor and a lot of Googling about how to do things in that video editor on the other monitor. But, that's how learning new software goes.
Yeah, it was super great. But yeah, moving on.
Well, you're not even going to let me complain about my not super great take our money?
Actually, yeah, for sure. Go for it.
So in all of the previous Take Our Monies, I'd played some version of Sacrifice, Red Black Sack when it had Mayhem Devil, or I think, something. I've played things like this. I guess I played a Yorian anyway, but I have experience playing Sacrifice. And so I decided I'd go back to Jund Food because there was sort of a new list floating around with Bolas' Citadel. And it wasn't even that the deck selection was bad. Someone else actually made top 8, beating Stelly in the Swiss with this Jund Citadel, or this Bolas' Citadel Jund deck. But I only really had one game where I drew a Citadel. Every other game I mulled a lot and my draws were bad, and I was probably also sequencing wrong because I picked up the deck the night before. So I just went 0-3 and then dropped, gave away a lot of arena codes, and then just hung around watching the other guys play. But yeah, I got smashed. Finished actual last in the standings. My breakers were the worst, and I had no points.
Jeez, I didn't realize
Straight
that.
from first to last, eh?
Yeah. So we got DWC on both ends of the spectrum, just bookending the tournament.
I top 8. I played the same deck as Stelly. I think we played the exact same list.
Yeah, I think the only change I made was I played a 2-2 split between Solar Blaze and Shatter the Sky, where you went 3-1 Solar Blaze Shatter. And the only reason I did that was because I only owned 2 Solar Blazes and didn't want to waste a wild card. So,
you know why I owned a bunch of Solar Blazes?
Oh, I know.
From playing High Alert.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, card nuts. But it's pretty good. After playing that tournament, I gotta say though, I'm quite happy that the cards that got banned. That deck was so dumb.
Oh yeah, dude. I hadn't played Standard in weeks. All I'd been playing was Historic. So I picked up Jeskai Luka, didn't practice at all with it, and won the entire event. And I played bad. Let's not say I was through a master class and just dominated people. I played bad and it just didn't matter.
Yeah, I played fine and it just felt like an absolute steamroll. My loss was I lost to the same player in the Swiss and the top 8. And then in the top 8 camps, I was pretty ugly. I drew 13 lands and 5 spells and it was still close.
Yeah, you had a very small amount of action against aggressive draws from mono red.
An insane. Well, he drew 13 spells and 5 lands.
Yeah,
and yeah, that's normal for mono red. It's just a really good, above average, slightly above average mono red draw. But yeah, no, I just even then the games were close. The deck is so good, and I had insane matches versus everyone else that just didn't feel close. The deck was so dominant. It just felt so dominant. I couldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because when I picked it, I thought, okay, well, a lot of people have experience playing against it. They'll show up prepared, but that just doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think some of the stats we talked about either last week or the week before demonstrate that as well. If you're into numbers, that despite the deck having been in the format with a target on its back for a while, it was still putting up higher win percentages post board. People just can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's just too much. You can't have a deck. I don't know.
That's not entirely true. Some people can do something about it, and our friends over at WotC banned 2 cards out of it. So if anyone hadn't heard, Agent of Treachery is banned in Standard starting today on Arena, along with Fires of Invention being banned in Standard. And so now we're in a brave new world.
Yeah, we called Fires of Invention last week on the show. And Cam and I thought maybe Teferi would get the axe. Adam wasn't sure. And we briefly mentioned Agent and kind of all came to the conclusion that no one would be unhappy if that card got banned. So maybe it was an option as well. And yeah, it ended up both those cards got banned in Standard and in Historic. I think for Standard, good call. Historic, I think you maybe missed the mark a little bit, but only time will tell. And yeah, the real big change was the companion rules change. So now, for companions, you can pay 3 generic mana at any time you could cast a sorcery to put the companion into your hand from your sideboard. So you're no longer able to cast the card straight out of your sideboard. You have to pay 3 mana as a sorcery to put it into your hand, which opens it up for, discard spells. It's obviously more expensive to cast your companions, although you can spread it out over multiple turns. And I think this is the first time Wizards has ever changed how a companion works rules-wise, like how a mechanic works rules-wise after it coming into print, right? Like, can you guys think of anything like
there's been
this coming
functional changes? They've never literally changed an existing keyword. There's been functional changes in that, like, protection shroud was being replaced with hexproof. But those are always new rules that are sort of improved versions of old keywords or improved versions of old text. Like when they changed, I think it's Banishing Light now, got reworded slightly so that there isn't like a leaves the battlefield trigger. It's just sort of a static effect. And they've been improving bad rules that way. But this is the first time that they've taken something and literally like changed its section in the comprehensive rules.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's been erratas, but that's different too, I think.
Yeah, they've never actually changed the text for a mechanic. They've changed text on cards just for better wording, but they've never actually changed how a mechanic works before.
Yeah, which is pretty
uncharted territory over here.
Yeah.
Unprecedented times.
I mean, that just really just goes to show how powerful Companion was. I mean, everyone is aware how powerful it was, but
Yeah, I mean, we had mentioned this, sort of lamenting it, but also just discussing it theoretically, that everyone was kind of forced into playing a companion. That's all the standard was. You had to make sure that whatever idea you had fit into a companion. People found a couple things to get around that. Wilderness Reclamation wasn't playing one. These new Jund food decks weren't playing one, but they were kind of the odd ones out, attacking the format in a certain way. And there was this incredible pressure in older formats as well to just make sure that you played these companions because they were so efficient. And so nerfing them like this, hopefully, detracts from them enough that you don't feel a need to play them. But if you want to try and work towards a payoff, you still may be able to.
Yeah.
So
thinking about this rules change, it affects certain companions and certain decks a lot more than others. Like, I think Lurrus decks are probably just going to stop playing Lurrus as a companion. It's a lot harder to fit 3 mana into your curve with a deck like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Yorion decks will be mostly unaffected because you can fit 3 mana into Yorion deck's curve relatively easy.
Yeah, they're going late otherwise.
With Fire's Gone, it makes it a little harder, but yeah, you can still do it for sure.
Yeah, like banning fires makes a lot of sense if this was the companion rule change you had coming down the pipeline for sure.
Yeah, it just wouldn't have changed Yorion at all if Fires was still around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking like Karuga decks might also be okay with this, considering that like Karuga decks want to play a glut of 3 mana cards, which makes their turn 6 usually like they try and play 2 3 mana things. So if your turn 6 in a Karuga deck is like play a 3 mana card and put Karuga in your hand, maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah, Karuga's interesting. It hasn't seen any play outside of Jeskai Fire's deck, so I wonder if there is a reasonable strategy that can play Karuga as a companion and still be okay without Fires.
Mm-hmm.
But funny.
Another thing that I'd be interested to see here, I think I mentioned this during spoiler season before we had any real experience with the companions, but I said that I predicted the only ones that would see play were the ones that you want the other 3 in your main deck. And at the time I was wildly undervaluing the power of an 8th card in your hand. But we might go back to that. It might be that like being able to pay 3 to get one out of your sideboard is like late game flood protection, and you're playing it in decks where you kind of already want that effect, and so the other 3 are in your main.
Yeah, maybe. That's interesting.
Adam, I think, was actually trying to brew with Yorion under this idea, playing it main.
Yeah, I was just curious because I think that the effect is really, really powerful still. And Yorion's still, like, the body's huge. It's a 4/5 flyer for 5. And just the potential upside of blinking things is just massive. Like, you can set up insane boards with it. So I think Yorion still might see play, and there might be options to see play. Like, I think about something like an Elemental stack, blinking a Resin Reef and a Cavalier and a bunch of stuff. Like, and just playing it main without having to sort of pay the 3 mana. But, there are probably still decks, like Stelly said, that I don't think Yorion minds that much. But losing Fires probably changes the Luca thing. Yeah, of course. And Agent, obviously. But
yeah. Are you guys happy overall with the bans and the changes to the rule?
Yeah. Part of me wanted to see Teferi go, but there's only a few months left to Teferi, so it's whatever.
Yeah, I just don't like playing against Teferi. I don't like that I feel pressured into playing Teferi. Like, a lot of brews that I want to make don't even have blue and white in them, and then I end up just ditching them and brewing a blue-white deck because Teferi's so strong. So I would have liked to see it go, but I understand that it's only here for like another 4 months, and then we get a bunch of new Teferis to play with. But
yeah, coming soon.
Yeah, but
weeks.
I understand these bans. I'm actually, so like the agent ban is whatever. Like, I don't think anyone's super sad to see it go, but I think it also probably could have stayed for the same reason Teferi stays. I understand banning it because people were really tired of seeing their permanents switch sides of the board. I am very, very glad about the Fires ban. That was something that I was worried they would leave because it has so much time left in Standard. Being an Eldraine, it's not going to rotate for like another year and a bit. So I'm quite glad that that's gone.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier about that ban. That card should have been... There's a chat message that's so embarrassing for me early on where I say to Pete, where I'm like, I don't know, Fires might be fine. where I was optimistic. This was like when it was first printed, and I was like,
dude, I remember talking about that card for our top 10 during the pre-show, and I was like, you know what? I think this card is actually pretty good. And both of you guys were really skeptic.
Yeah, I thought it was a fixed and worse version of Wilderness Reclamation because you only get twice as much mana.
I was like a little skeptical, but once I played with it, I was like, wait, this card's pretty strong. But all the pieces weren't there yet. I don't know.
As soon as I saw it being used with Cavaliers and like I realized the power of getting sorcery speed things instead of like this restriction of only being able to use the mana off Wilderness Rec for instance, then I realized I was wrong. But before I had seen play, I didn't think it was as strong as it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like a lot of the standard bannings and even historic bannings to a lesser extent are sort of just the result of like, how do I phrase this? They're not individual cards themselves. Like it's not like Agent was the problem on its own, Like I think I talked about this before. It's not like Oko. Like it's not like Oko, where Oko was just, nothing you could do. Like in concert with other cards, it was insane. Like Oko was just on its own, like a complete and utter design failure.
Yeah.
But Agent and Fires, like that's why I said, like I'm not whatever. But like at the point they exist now, yeah, they're horrible and they're like a massive flaw. But I think it's because of the way Standard shaped out and the cards that it evolved into, which I think is mostly fine. Like I don't see the problem with that. So I don't see those as like design failure. Well, Agent, I guess, maybe is a design failure. Fires probably more so. I don't know. It's close. But like the companion thing was a disaster and should not have been, printed, basically, is how I see it.
Yeah. Like there could have been standard formats. For instance, there could have been versions of Ikoria or versions of Theros Beyond Death that didn't include certain cards and in which Agent stayed on the fringes and no one cared about it for its life in Standard. Printing things like Luca, printing things like Winota brings Agent to the forefront of obnoxious. Fires, though, I think, like, limits design space. Like, if Fires is not going to be obnoxious, design space is limited so much that I don't think the power level of Standard would be low compared to even old standards, and that's not really how they're designing at the moment. So I think Fires was doomed from the outset, just combined with their philosophy on Standard power level and how it works as a mechanic.
Are you talking about Fires the card or Fires their design philosophy?
Fires of Invention, the card. But yeah, Fires of Invention, the card, I think was doomed by the power level that they wanted to push their Fire design philosophy. But anyway, I'm glad that it's gone as a mana mechanic. I've been pretty vocal about disliking mana mechanics.
Mana mechanics.
Oh yeah. Wilderness Rec rotates at the same time Teferi does, right? So we only have a couple months left of that.
I'm honestly not too worried about Wilderness Rec. For some reason, my experience playing against that card is not as bad. I feel like I win a lot of games where they even have Rec for a few turns. Like, I don't know.
I think Wilderness Rec won't be as good as everyone thinks it will be, because I think we'll see a bit of a resurgence in aggro decks, like Embercleave decks specifically. And those decks always preyed upon Wilderness Rec. And those decks are really held down by not only companions, but just Fire's decks existing in the format. So I think we'll see a bit of a resurgence there, which will keep Wilderness Rec in check.
Yeah, I'm sure the deck will be at a healthy place in this metagame for a bit. I mean, I hope. But just that card and that style of card as a principle, I'm excited to see leave Standard, just as I'm excited to see Fires of Invention leave. And I hope nothing replaces them.
You know, hopping off Standard for a little bit, I've just been thinking about Pioneer. There's been a really good Jeskai Luca deck that's been seeing some play in Pioneer right now that plays all of these cards, and it's a Yorion deck. So obviously Fire still exists in Pioneer, and all of these cards are legal. So I wonder if that deck is just going to get incredibly good now that it doesn't really care about the companion rule change, since it has access to Fires.
Oh, yeah. All its competitors have to play with this new 3-mana tax, and it can kind of sidestep it.
Exactly.
That's interesting. It's going to be like that's actually really neat that there's this like testing ground for what Standard could have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be keeping my eye on that, see if that deck gets a little too out of hand. Because, I mean, it was taking down events, top 8ing, doing relatively well over the past month and a bit. So I wonder if this rule change just makes it a little bit too good. But only time will tell.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Shakes out for sure.
Yeah. Well, before we move on into a little bit of topic discussion, just wanted to take this opportunity to plug our sponsor, WizardTower.com, your source for all your Magic single needs. Check them out. Get your Ikoria singles on WizardTower.com. And also, we have a new sponsor that we get to welcome to the podcast. Card Hoarder is the new sponsor of the DWC stream and the show. So you want to check them out, head on over to Card Hoarder. They've given us access to some loan accounts so we can start bringing some more MTGO content to the stream and to the Versus series. So big shout out to them. It's pretty exciting to be able to have a new sponsor on the show for the first time. So
yeah, letting us diversify the formats we can talk about. Like, as you mentioned, Jeskai Luca's still around in Pioneer. So I'm just going to say right now that if we do a Pioneer episode of, say, Versus or some content about Pioneer, I'm going to veto Jeskai Luca. I don't want to see it played anymore. I don't think anybody wants to watch it, at least for a bit.
Fair enough.
But yeah, speaking of Versus, last night we were playing some, even though the companion change wasn't live on Standard or on Arena, we could self-enforce the other bans of Agent and Fires. So we were playing some decks that didn't have either of those cards, trying to brew and look towards, what things might be like, what sort of fun strategies we could try starting today. And there were some good ones. I had fun last night.
Yeah, we brewed up some sweet ones. We didn't bring any metagame decks. All 6 of the decks we brought were brews. So we got to play with some cards that haven't really been seeing much Standard play at all. So that was fun. There was a really interesting Abzan Wolves deck from our Take Our Money event on Sunday that we talked about a bit on stream and caught our eye. So I took that deck, changed it up a lot, made it a little bit more streamlined, brought it last night, and it actually performed really well. A lot of the cards in it looked very good. Vivian 5, I think, was a standout from a couple of our decks last night. Just looked incredibly good every time it was in play. A couple games, it just won on its own.
Yeah, card was insane. It's just the tutor effect, but it feels so fair, the tutor effect, not like Luca, but yeah, just the constant bodies are so annoying. They're modal for what you want to do with them. Vivian was unbelievable. It's an experimental frenzy. That card was pushed to the margins in Standard and bannings happened as a result is truly insane because the power level on that card is through the roof.
Yeah, I constantly forget that you can cast cards off the top of your library with that card. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when I realize it because it's almost every game I forget.
Yeah, and then it's self-enabled to clear the top of your deck if you don't like it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's crazy. You can do so much with Vivian. super interesting planeswalker, lots of options, incredibly powerful. I think that's like the first lesson to take away from the verses from like our standard testing post bannings was the flexibility and power of a card like Vivian if you're looking to brew decks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a super powered fair card, and fair cards just haven't really had a spot, but now they probably do. So if you're looking to, control the board, generate a bit of card advantage, and, eventually overwhelm your opponent that way, Vivian is your planeswalker.
But yeah, this realization of how powerful Vivian has appeared to get with the bannings and the changes to the companion rules, this is kind of what brought around our topic today, which is focused around cards we think players can reconsider in this new standard format and cards that just deserve a second look in general. Starting with, of course, Vivian 5, which we've already been talking about. Obviously, the comparison for the 5-drop Planeswalker slot here is Nissa Who Shakes the World, which, hasn't seen really any play at all since Ikoria came out. But I think we all expect to see a bit of a resurgence of the from our notes here, the good old UG ramp package, which is Growth Spiral, Uro, Nissa, Krasis.
Yeah, all just like incredibly powerful cards that are still in standard, playing sort of the accelerated fair plan as compared to it's just has faster mana, it has faster card draw, it has bigger threats than sort of other fair decks. And there was a time when it dominated standard. So if you have all those cards crafted from that time, you can probably very easily go back to playing those decks, whether you want to make them Sultai or you want to splash some other color or stay blue-green, maybe things like Mass Manipulation return as payoffs for these big ramp strategies. So many of those decks still all exist and probably have windows to exist now.
Yeah, and so what I was talking about, obviously there's a comparison there between do you want to play Nissa and do you want to play Vivian? And while I think a lot of players would come to the conclusion that Nissa is a more powerful card, I think not every deck in the format would rather play Nissa over Vivian. I think there are actually a lot of strategies that would much rather have Vivian's abilities than having the mana doubler effect from Nissa Who Shakes the World. And I think that really showed last night with how powerful, Vivian was in just the Abzan deck.
Yeah, another thing to consider now that you sort of have this option between 5-drop planeswalkers is that Nissa has, I would argue, a more expensive deck building cost attached than Vivian 5. So for instance, if you want to be a heavy Abzan strategy or a heavy Jund strategy, playing a lot of Shocklands or a lot of basics that aren't forests, maybe Fabled Passage, Vivian's probably better for you because you need a lot of forests to actually capitalize off of Nissa's static ability. And it sort of restricts the other colors you can play. It's probably the reason we've seen, blue-green continue to exist as an option, just straight blue-green ramp, instead of sometimes being Sultai, because blue-green ramp can get away with playing 7 or 8 literal basic forests. So if you're looking to branch out and diversify your access to the color pie, you might not be able to pay that cost for Nissa.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what some of the determining factors I think are also just what other cards in your. Yeah, it's going to just be a deck by deck basis because they're just different cards. It seems like they compete, but I think the decks that want them are just pretty radically different. Although having said that, I'm just making my prediction now, by the way, for the next major MC that Hydroid Krasis comes out of retirement after winning its Lifetime Achievement Award to collect another W. Sort of like when GSP came out of retirement and beat Michael Bisping, for the middleweight championship.
I'm willing to buy it.
The Hydroid Krasis, it retired early, but it retired on top.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because it's not like it just started losing and being bad. It just retired on top. And now it's just going to come back. Hey, I'm still Hydroid Krasis. What's going on here?
It's pretty variable in size, too. Krasis could return to any weight class it wants.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really good at cutting weight. It's really good at bulking. It can do it all.
All right. Another card on our list that might be bound to see a resurgence is Bolas's Citadel. Now, Cam played a mono black devotion combo deck last night on Versus, and there was a pretty funny turn where he was deciding if he wanted to be greedy and play Bolas' Citadel or take a different line. Decided to just play the Citadel and then killed me immediately that turn. And
yeah, I mean, there was like a spell that I cast and then a Gray Merchant on top. And because I had Citadel and some other stuff in play, it was just lethal. So like the high roll potential of Bolas' Citadel, especially now that Ikoria and Theros have added sort of this like strong black package to support it, along with creatures like, you now have Priest of the Forgotten Gods alongside Cat Oven, alongside Woe Strider and Midnight Reaper. Like that sort of sacrifice package, wherever it shows up, is very powerful. And so if you want to just stay mono black and use it to support Bolas' Citadel, like it proved quite good last night.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you go back and watch that highlight video from the DWC Versus, I played against Jun's Sacrifice in the Swiss portion of the event. And both games 1 and 2, my opponent played a Bolas' Citadel, tapped out, and then killed me immediately that turn, back-to-back games.
It's high roll turns, you just win. It has the downside that its low roll turns are like, there's a land on top and you can't play it because you just played your 6th land or you hit 2 lands in a row, which are obviously not great, or like there's another Bolas' Citadel on top. So like, it's not without its costs, but I think a lot of the downsides associated to having medium Citadel turns where you can't cast much are removed, because in testing for Jun Citadel and in my playing in our Taker Money, which I guess I forgot to mention, but all 3 of my losses were to Jeskai Luka. It was the only thing I played against.
Couldn't be happier to see it gone.
Right on.
Yeah, loving it. But especially with Jeskai Luka, like in a format with Jeskai Luka, if your Citadel turn is medium, you don't untap with that Citadel. Your opponent untaps with the Citadel. And then they get access to it. So those like big swingy things that you might potentially need to untap with to take advantage of get a lot better with Agent being on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's probably like cards in that category that we're not thinking of here. I mean, generally those types of effects aren't super great in Standard. Like we say over and over that, things need an ETB to be playable in Standard. Like you can't hope to untap because if your opponent interacts, then your deck has no power. And that's still going to be true. But something like Citadel, like the longer it's in play, the more of an advantage you get. It still has sort of an ETB, but it sort of suffers this, but sometimes needing to untap issue. And so there might be other cards like that. Maybe some mutate creature, maybe one of the Apex Hunters starts seeing some play because, there will be more chance that you untap with it now. There could be tons of cards in that camp that have just sort of been blocked from our minds.
Yeah, I didn't even really think about that. I kind of did at one point when I was goofing around with mutate decks and in how limited they were in their sort of like in the metagame because of their strategy of just going all in on one creature, and how, Agent just sort of, makes that entire strategy completely unplayable. But I'm curious, going forward, if there's a space for mutate at all. There might be.
Yeah, who knows?
We live in a brave new world.
Yeah, I wonder how much the mutate decks in Standard will be affected by the rules change, because all those decks played Umori as a companion before. And I mean, those decks existed. There was a lot of players who were doing relatively well on ladder with them. And I wonder if Umori decks care much about that extra 3 mana tacked on. Yeah, maybe Adam, you can provide some insight, because I know you've played some mutate decks, but...
Yeah, I think that Amori doesn't actually I don't know. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as you'd think. Like, it's not like Yorion, where when you cast Yorion on a good Yorion turn, it kind of feels like the game's just over. Like those good Yorion turns, like, although to be fair, what was that hilarious, like a clip that Cam posted in the highlight reel on YouTube, where you had the insane Yorion turn and then just got Citadel. But, Amori doesn't have the same impact because you have the 2 mana looter, the baby Godzilla. And
Polywog Symbiote.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other ways that Amori is not completely necessary. A lot of those decks play Uro. Sometimes they play Risen Reef. They have ways to get ahead on mana, and they already have creature reduction. What I would be interested in seeing is the green-blue mutate decks playing Nylea. Because I think that with like Endray's Forerunners, a Gilded Goose, all these things laying around, that they could do some work.
Yeah, Nylea's not a human. So if you mutate something onto a Nylea, it keeps the devotion text and could become an enchantment.
Yeah, and I think becomes indestructible.
It's probably, yeah, but like your creature could stop being a creature because of Nylea. I wonder. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but Nylea gives a creature discount is sort of the central, idea of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those mutate decks that have existed, they might be able to come back. But like when I was thinking about mutate strategies that you might need to untap with, I'm thinking of like my turn 5 is I'm casting Nethroi, and I'm crossing my fingers that I get to mutate it next turn.
Yeah. Oh man, imagine being able to play Nethroi right now. That'd be so fun.
Yeah, like that'd be awesome. Or like, because every single time I like open up my collection and start scrolling through cards thinking about what I want to do, I keep like almost habitually adding Nethroi's and Sea Dasher Octopus to the same deck, being like, I'm going to mutate this thing for 2. And then never figuring out how to like flesh out that 4-color deck. But like, maybe there's time now. Like maybe you have time to play some tap lands because your opponent doesn't have 8 and then 15 mana. Maybe the things can work out. Like maybe a rise in aggressive decks to prey on things like Wilderness Reclamation means that you're playing against more aggressive decks, so you're not playing against Wraths. So reanimating a bunch of stuff with Nethroi is worthwhile. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, the fact that like the Apex Predators are just currently a flop has got to be just depressing for the design team, right?
It's depressing for me. Like I brought a Vadrock deck last night. Didn't do great, but like I'm so committed to that card because it's so close to good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean the whole mutate mechanic has just been a flop for constructed games, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's weird because there is probably an okay argument that it isn't a great experience in limited either. I'm not convinced it's an entirely enjoyable or positive limited experience as well. We didn't really talk much about limited this season because the standard and other formats just all felt crazy.
Yeah, there was so much going on like every week.
But the limited format, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think it's great. I think it's okay. The gameplay's fine, but Mutate just has this sort of feel bad because it's all in one creature. So either it gets removed or you steamroll them, and it doesn't feel like there's an in between. Like it's a 0 or 10 gameplay experience.
Yeah, I kind of had that experience. Got steamrolled by some Mutate creatures and then learned, which sorts of removal I needed and learned that I needed more removal to be able to deal with Mutate stacks. And then once you like the drafts where you get access to a lot of Blood Curdles or a lot of Rumbling Rocksides to remove Mutate stacks early, like those decks felt nuts. Like obviously having a lot of removal and limited is good, but I would almost take too much removal and like cut creatures, and it was fine because you stopped Mutate from snowballing. But then the drafts where like you just didn't see those cards, like sometimes you see 0 of those come around, felt kind of unwinnable. Like I just don't have access to the correct removal and get mutated out of the game.
Yeah, and so I wonder if this sort of just core problem with Mutate is transferable to Standard, although you can really pop off with some Mutate decks. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. I might spend some time this week. Maybe I'll stream Friday or Saturday, and I'll try and stream some Mutate decks and try and find a way to win with them.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have our new sub badges are up, as well as the new emotes we got are waiting to be approved by Twitch. So get to test those out as well.
Nice. Yeah, it should be interesting to see. Yeah, the Citadel thing though, I wonder if that card's going to start seeing a decent amount of play. I mean, that card's just comically powerful, right?
Yeah, and it was seeing play in Standard alongside the Explore package before Ixalan rotated. The Explore package being a way to mitigate having to pay life for your spells. Oftentimes you gain life in those turns because of how messed up Wild Growth Walker was. And for a while, people couldn't really find a replacement for that sort of life gain engine while casting spells, but they seem to have come to something close with Ayara, a Cauldron Familiar, and Grey Merchant. So having all of that together sort of gave Bolas' Citadel a home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I mean, Citadel started to see some play in Junsac decks right near the end of Throne of Eldraine Standard before Theros Beyond Death came out. And now it's been seeing a resurgence over the past couple of weeks as well. And I mean, I think that deck only gains from the bannings and the rules changes because it didn't play a companion before. It had an okay matchup versus Jeskai Luka. And
oh yeah, Jund Food gains a ton, especially if people go back to aggressive strategies. Like if people are trying to Ember Cleave by playing 1-drops, like Mayhem Devil just mows those decks over.
exactly. So I think this Bolas' Citadel Jund Sack deck is probably a really good place to start this format.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can't really deny the power of Mayhem Devil.
Yeah, but speaking of sack decks, I think it's an interesting discussion to see where the sacrifice decks and standards go, because obviously all of the best performing ones were Lurrus decks, but for those decks with such a low curve to be able to adopt the new companion rule change, I think it's going to be a little too awkward. It's not very easy to just fit 3 mana into your curve with a deck like Lurrus Sacrifice. So maybe these decks just go back to being Mayhem Devil, Woe Strider Sacrifice decks. Maybe they play a couple of Lurrus in the main deck. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think the cost of like having a Lurrus so much later in the game by having to find like 3 mana to buy it isn't worth having to play only 2-drops when, as you mentioned, there's so many powerful 3-drops. But I am really interested in them playing like, maybe 2 or 3 Lurrus main. Because then you could still, like if you want to see 1 per game, what does people usually recommend? You play 3 copies. As the game goes late, maybe you find your Lurrus. Like with some main, maybe the turns 4 and 5 from that deck look about the same. And it also, okay, I'm not going to say it makes it stronger because the consistency from Lurrus as a traditional companion is insane. But it might add to more grind potential. Because when I played against Lurrus, and I think a lot of the strategies decks had playing against Lurrus lists, they lined up their resources in order to get the Lurrus. Sometimes Lurrus decks played things like Call of the Death Dweller to bring it back, but oftentimes you'd like save your removal to hit the Lurrus because it cuts off so much card advantage from the sacrifice decks, or you play out creatures to block to bait them to play the Lurrus so that you can wrath the Lurrus away. Like it really revolved around cutting off that avenue. But let's say you play Lurrus, bring something back, they kill it. You have a second Lurrus because you drew one, and like now you have another engine. Maybe these games can go a bit longer. It's definitely going to play like change the texture of matchups.
Yeah, I think so. I don't really have a lot to add on that. I think that the 3 is probably too much for most formats for this card, but I agree that people can still play these cards in sort of main deck fashion, I think, with Lurrus and stuff. So I have no idea what will happen if it's good enough on its own, but the power level is pretty high on that card still.
Yeah.
Which is saying a lot.
Another good place to start in the format, which I think we've mentioned, is Wilderness Wreck. However, I think a lot of the Wilderness Wreck lists that you're going to find if you, say, go to MTG Goldfish right now are pretty entangled with Jeskai Luka. They have a lot of main deck inclusions for that matchup. They have a lot of like deck building decisions just to prey on Jeskai Luka. I know winner of one of our organizationals, Wappa, been playing Wilderness Wreck a ton. And he was always very happy to get paired against Jeskai Luka because his list was so, tuned to target it. So while Wilderness Reclamation is still going to be powerful, I'm curious how it disentangles itself. Like, does it still play Mystical Disputes main? Or, Alex, you had an interesting opinion here that Mystical Dispute might get better.
Yeah, so I think just Dispute gets much better in a format without fires. Obviously, it's pretty obvious why. Like, if a fire is ever resolved, the Mystical Disputes in your hand were pretty bad. I expect that Bant mid-range decks are going to be very popular going forward. Yeah, I'm not sure if the Bant decks are going to stick to Yorion builds or going to go back to 60 cards, but Mystical Dispute was always a card that was very good versus that matchup. So I see that card just seeing more main deck play across the format in general, especially if Wilderness Reclamation is going to be one of the top dogs as well. That card's obviously very good versus them too. But yeah, when it comes to Wilderness Rec, I think I mentioned this already on this cast. I can't remember if it was on this or in the pre-show. One of the natural predators to Wilderness Reclamation has always been the low to the ground aggressive decks, like Mono Red, Embercleave, those decks. And obviously, I think Mono Red is going to go back to playing Embercleave because just the upside of having Obosh as a companion just isn't worth that extra 3 mana.
And that's not a deck that's going to be putting Obosh main.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yeah, you gain so much from being able to play cards like Robber of the Rich, Runaway Steamkin, and Embercleave in that deck that it's just Obosh. I don't think Obosh is worth it anymore. So those decks were always very good at beating Wilderness Reclamation. So maybe rec decks have to go back to playing, maybe Bone Crusher Giants in the main deck, or Scorching Dragonfires, or maybe just back to Storm's Wrath entirely. We saw a lot of the early Wilderness Rec decks last format doing that to be able to keep pace with the aggro decks. Or maybe the Rec decks take their evolution like they did last format and morphing more towards flash builds, like the deck I won the Arena Community Cup with a couple months ago, playing Brazen Borrowers, Bone Crusher Giants, Night Pack Ambushers in the main deck, and just having the Expansion Explosion Reclamation package as well. But that build of the deck had a lot more game versus the aggressive decks in the format.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's like a bunch of different ways it can go, because really, as you mentioned, like the Wilderness Reclamation package is 4 Wilderness Reclamations and 3 or 4 Expansion Explosions. That leaves a lot of the room in the deck to tool it and tune it to a metagame however you want.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of options there. That deck has pretty diverse options, right?
Yeah. Well, we have to wait one more day to start seeing new decks, as everything got pushed back by one day. So we'll start to see some more standard iteration starting tomorrow. We're recording on Thursday, so this is Friday. And we'll be back next week on Wednesday night for DWC Versus with some new standard decks again. And we'll be able to try out some companions as well, maybe. But I'm excited to get back into standard and play a new format. Like I mentioned before, I haven't been playing standard at all. Yeah, it's just been so miserable. So it'll be fun to get back into that format.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also looking with the card hoarder sponsorship, looking forward to playing some Legacy possibly on stream. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Be on the lookout for more streams from us. Twitch.tv/Disorganized Wizards Club.
Yeah, so that being said, like, even though the standard is going to be pretty exciting, just want to remind people our DWC event is coming up on June 28th. So, like, it's going to be in the new format. You're going to need some wild cards to craft a sweet new deck. So, like, unless you're sitting on tons of them, maybe be a bit conservative, because you're going to that's the real big event coming up. Even though new standard is going to be pretty sweet, actual new standard is probably going to be sweeter.
Exactly. And this event, over $500 US cash prize pool. It's not an event you're going to want to miss. So save up those wild cards so you can craft some Core 21 cards on release weekend and come battle and try and win some cash.
Hell yeah, come get it.
All right, on that note, thank you all for joining the club this week. Make sure, as always, you check out wizardtower.com and Card Hoarder for your in real life or digital Magic single needs.
Is there a difference anymore?
Nope. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/DWC Podcast. Check out those new updated tiers. And however you're listening to the show, whether it's Podbean, iTunes, any podcast app, leave a review, rate the show, share it with your friends. Everything helps keep this thing growing, bring it to new listeners. And yeah, thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next week.
See ya.